I always enjoyed walking at night, especially at Central Park. It's quieter, almost empty, and helps me organize thoughts after a full day. While many avoid the park at night, I like the tranquility it offers, the distant sound of the city mixed with the tree molding. It was one of those moments when everything seemed suspended, as if time slowed down. The wind was light, cold enough to shiver the skin, but not enough to disturb. The lights of the posts launched long shadows on the floor, creating distorted figures that moved as I walked. Near me, a couple was talking low, sitting on one of the benches. The man laughed at something the woman said, a contained, intimate laugh. The sound mingled with the sporadic corner of a cricket, the ranger of the leaves under my feet, and a distant train whistle. A common, comfortable, safe environment. I kept walking, my hands in my pockets, breathing the fresh air, letting my thoughts wander. But then something made me stop. A bag. She was leaning against one of the wooden benches, between open garbage bags and disposable glasses. This by itself was strange. It was not any bag, but a brand, one of those models that cost the equivalent of a month of rent. The black leather shone in the light of the pole, almost intact, as if it had been left there recently. My first instinct was to think that someone had forgotten her, maybe a silly mistake of someone distracted. But why amid the garbage? I hesitated. Something in the scene bothered me. Central Park was not strange to abandoned objects, but such a bag, left like that, seemed wrong. I approached a little more, watching her. The gold enclosure was intact, with no signs of breaking, and there were no visible dirt marks. Why would anyone place something like this? I looked around. The couple was still there, but they didn't talk anymore. They looked distracted, looking at the cell phones themselves. The rest of the park was empty. No unusual movement, no suspicious presence. Still, I felt a shiver up the spine. I touched the bag with the tip of the shoe, pushing it slightly. Heavy. There was something inside. My heart made a small jump. Maybe there were documents, a phone, some track of who was the owner. For a second, I thought of leaving her there. It was not my problem, but what if anyone was looking for her? I lowered myself and took the bag. The leather was cold to the touch, as if it had been left there recently, but there was no one around. By holding it, I felt a weight inside, something solid. My chest squeezed a little. Perhaps it was just a change of luck, something left by carelessness, and that could be returned to the owner. But then, a thought occurred to me. What if it was something worse? It was at this moment that I realized something strange. The couple who were in the bench, hitherto absorbed on cell phones, was now looking toward me. Not directly to me, but to the bag in my hands. The faces were impassive, expressionless, but there was something disturbing in the way they watched me, as if they were waiting to see what I would do. My first instinct was to pretend I didn't realize and keep walking. But as he stepped back, one detail froze me in place. Their cell phones were turned off. The screens dark. They have never been moving anything. My heart began to beat faster. Something was not right. I turned slowly, tried to ignore the feeling that I needed to leave. But before I walked away, I noticed something even stranger. In the middle of the trash, where the bag was before, there was a small piece of white paper folded in half. I was sure I wasn't there before. Someone had left that now. My breathing was stuck in the throat. I tried to convince myself that it was just coincidence, any roll, but the logic was already giving way to growing discomfort. I bent down to get it. The paper was folded meticulously, as if someone had taken time to leave him exactly there. My hands trembled slightly as I unfolded the sheet. 3 words stared at me, written in red. "You were the next." I stood, the roll between my fingers, feeling the weight of the silence around me. I looked forward to the couple. They were no longer there. The bank was empty. A cold traveled my pimple, and I realized that my breath was accelerated. Suddenly the park seemed different. The shadows were longer, the light of the weaker posts. The air looked heavier, loaded with something I couldn't name. The bag was still in my hands, but at that moment I no longer wanted to hold her anymore. I looked around. There was no one paying attention to me. The park was calm, just the rustle of the trees and the sound of distant steps. The posts leaned a weak light on the way, distorting the shadows of the leaves, making them look like something they weren't. A colder breeze passed, making my skin shiver slightly. I squeezed the bag against my chest for a second, feeling its strange weight, and bent down to examine it better. It was heavy, but it didn't seem to contain anything solid. The leather was soft, without scratches, and the gold enclosure shone intact, as if the bag had been left there recently. I opened it carefully, kind of waiting to find something normal: wallet, cell phone, some personal belonging that could identify the owner. But inside there was only one item, a white, closed envelope. My heart accelerated a little. I took the envelope and turned it on between my fingers. The roll was thick, without marks, without sender, with nothing that suggested who had put him there. My instinct told me to let it, drop my bag and leave, but my curiosity was stronger. Perhaps it was an identification, something that would allow me to return the bag to the owner. I took a deep breath and ripped the side of the envelope. The sound of the roll ending echoed louder than it should in the silence of the park. I took the sheet inside and, when I unfolded it, felt a shiver up my spine. The letter had only 3 words written in red letters. "You are the next." I stared at those words for a few seconds, as if my brain is trying to give them a rational meaning. What did that mean? Who had written it? My chest was tight, and for a moment I felt a light dizziness. I laughed, a short, nervous laugh, and looked around again. A prank? Has anyone forgot it here on purpose? But why? To scare who? It made no sense. The park was practically empty, and there was no one there to see my reaction. If it was a joke, who was laughing now? My instinct told me to drop my bag and leave, and I almost did it. But then, I heard something, a dry sound, like the crack of a breaking branch, and came from behind me. The sound was fast, clear. My breathing was trapped for a moment. I turned my head slowly, my heart fired, trying to locate the origin of the noise. But there was nothing, just trees, empty paths, the weak light of the posts throwing elongated shadows on the floor. I knew I hadn't imagined. The noise had been real. Something or someone was there. I squeezed the bag harder. My hands were cold and sweaty. The park, which once looked like a quiet refuge, now had something different. I couldn't say what, but it was as if the air was heavier, as if the environment itself was waiting for me to do something. I swallowed hard and tried to think rationally. It could be an animal, a squirrel maybe, a raccoon sowing the garbage. But the most primitive part of my brain told me no. I took a deep breath and took a step back. It was when I heard another noise, this time closer, a light creak, as if something was moving slowly. My eyes ran through the park, trying to find any sign of movement. The couple who were in the bank first, they were no longer there. The bank was empty, as if they had never been there. My heart jumped to the chest. I had seen those people. I was sure, but now missing, without sound of steps, no warning. I squeezed the letter inside the bag and started walking, trying not to look terrified. The most rational would be to get out of there. Drop the bag, forget it, go home, and pretend that nothing had happened. But my feet continued to move slowly, hesitant, as if a part of me still expected a logical explanation for all that. I looked at the letter one more time. You were the next. The words seemed more vivid now, denser, as if they carried a weight that I didn't understand yet. That's when something fell from the top of the nearest tree. The sound was dry, deaf, like a dead weight reaching the floor. My whole body froze, and then, very, very low, almost imperceptible, I heard a whisper. My name. Someone whispered my name, and I swear there was no one there. I turned fast, trying to locate the origin of the sound. Nothing, only the empty park and the yellowish light of the posts. The air seemed colder than before, as if the wind had changed direction. I squeezed the letter in my hands. My brain tried to rationalize that. It was a trot. Someone must have left this bag there on purpose, just to scare unsuspecting. But who would do that? And why? I forced myself to laugh, a dry and convinced sound, as if I tried to convince myself that there was nothing wrong. But the laugh died fast. Something inside me insisted that this was not just a coincidence. My chest climbed and descended faster than I should, as if my body already knew what my mind still refused to accept. I looked around. The couple who were there minutes before? Total silence. The bench where they were sitting now was empty. I blinked a few times. It made no sense. I had just seen them, They were talking, laughing softly, and now, nothing. No silhouette in the distance, no steps, nothing that suggested that they had lifted up and left. I felt a strange cold on my spine. Can anyone get out of the scene that fast without making a noise? The park was large, but surrounded by illuminated paths. If they had broken, I would still see them in the distance. My eyes swept the area, seeking any sign of movement. Nothing, only stretched shadows on the floor, dancing at the rhythm of the leaves that stirred with the wind. I took a deep breath, trying to keep calm, but that's when I felt. Do you know that feeling when you are sure someone is watching you? A cold in the stomach, the nape-haired goose bumps, the breath gets heavy. I was alone, but I didn't feel alone. My body was rigid. It was a primitive instinct, a silent warning that shouted inside me. The kind of sensation that makes an animal perceive the predator even before seeing it. The bag was still in my hands. The wrinkled roll inside the sweaty palm. My throat was dry. Don't look back. The thought came out of nowhere. A phrase without owner, without logic, but that sounded almost like an order. Don't look back. The wind blew stronger, making the branches move above me. The rustle of the leaves should be a normal sound, but at that moment it seemed different, like whispers. I wanted to leave. I wanted to drop that bag and forget it all. But my feet looked stick to the floor. So without thinking, I broke the rule I had created myself. I looked back, and for a second, I only saw the park, the way, the trees, the world exactly as it should be. But then something changed. There was nothing there. But at the same time, there was something. It was a strange absence, like a space where something should be, but it wasn't. Like a hole in the world, a failure in reality. My heart was beating so hard that I felt the blood throbbing in the ears. My whole body screamed for me to get out of there. And then the nearest light blinked. Twice. And deleted. The pitch swallowed that part of the way, and I swear I saw a figure in the last second before the darkness. I didn't wait any longer. My body finally reacted before my mind could hesitate again. I stepped back, then another, and then I started walking fast. My hands trembled as I stuck the letter in my pocket and holding the bag against my chest. The park seemed bigger now. Each shadow seemed to move. Each sound seemed expanded. The wind was no longer a quiet whisper, but a noise that cut the silence, as if something was hiding in it. The way ahead seemed longer than it should, as if I was walking in circles. And then I felt again, that presence, not like a look, but as a weight. Something was there, something I couldn't see, something I knew. And at that moment, for the first time, I was sure this story had not started with the bag. She'd been happening for a long time. I just hadn't realized. I kept the letter in my pocket and closed the bag. Maybe I took her to the police station in the morning, but at that moment, I just wanted to get out of there. The air seemed heavier, as if the park itself was expecting something. The silence became almost palpable, dense, filling the spaces between the sounds. My heart was still hitting my chest, and my breath was shorter than usual. I hurried the step, following the bright path. The light of the post seemed weaker now, the yellowish halos barely crossing the darkness between the trees. Every few meters, I looked back, hoping to see something sometime. But the park was empty, or at least it should be. That's when I heard it again. This time was a whisper, low, almost inaudible but close, as if someone had said my name. My body froze. The sound had not come from a specific place, not from behind, not from the left, not from the right. It was as if it had been said very close to my ear, but without a body to carry it. A shiver went up my back. My vision was cloudy for a second, as if a tingling had taken over my body. I turned in all directions, waiting for someone, anything, but the park was empty, except for the bag. She was no longer in my hand. The record took a moment to fall. My arms were empty. The weight I carried was gone. My mind sought a logical explanation, but nothing made sense. I didn't let her go. I didn't let her fall, but there she was a few meters from me halfway. The white envelope was by her side, and now there was something written on the floor. A single word, drawn on earth as if someone had written it recently, the contours still fresh. Look, my throat dried up. No, I didn't want to look. The wind blew, raising dust, dried leaves, moving the branches of the trees. But the letters scribbled on the floor remained intact, as if they were protected by something I couldn't see. My breathing was too fast, my head started to hurt. Every part of my body shouted that I needed to get out of there. But my feet didn't move. It was as if something had arrested me to the ground, as if there was an invisible thread between me and that. I was being tested. It was a choice. Look or not. I swallowed hard, tried to back down a step, but my knees looked weak. My heart beat the ribs as if trying to escape my own body. The silence around it became heavier. The feeling of being observed grew, becoming suffocating. So something moved, not close to me, not among the trees. There, in the corner of my eye, it was not a shadow, it was not a figure. It was an absence, something that was there but at the same time was not. And then came the second whisper, lower this time, closer. My eyes fixed on the bag, the envelope, the word written on the floor. My mind shouted that I shouldn't look, that I should run, that anything was better than giving in to that. But my muscles did not obey. Time seemed suspended. And then the nearest light pole blinked, twice, and deleted. The darkness took over that part of the way. My body stiffened, my breathing was stuck in my throat. The silence was absolute, without wind, without leaves moving. And then in the pitch, something moved, right in front of the bag. I didn't want to look, but I knew it was too late. I didn't look. I took the bag off the floor with my trembling fingers, turned my back, and left the park. Each step was a conscious effort not to run. If I ran, that would become real. If I ran, I would confirm that something was wrong. The path seemed longer than before. The posts of the post seemed weaker, distant. My heart hammered the ribs, and with every shadow that moved with the wind, I felt a tightness in my chest. The bag weighed in my hand, not so much for the content, but for the sensation, as if carrying it was a mistake, as if somehow I was taking something I shouldn't. My mind was trying to join the pieces, the bat, the letter, the word on the floor, the couple disappearing, the whisper. Nothing made sense. I forced myself to remember that I was at Central Park, that nothing could really happen there. But then, why did you feel I wasn't alone? My feet touched the hard floor of the sidewalk when I finally left the park. The city looked different. The noise of the cars, the people, should have been a relief, but it seemed distant, muffled, as if I was still stuck at that moment. When I got home, I locked the door behind me and threw the bag in the corner of the room. My chest was still rising and descended fast, but now in my safe space, I tried to convince myself that it was just tiredness, paranoia. I took a glass of water, but my hand trembled so much that I dropped half the liquid in the sink. I took a deep breath, squeezed my eyes, repeated to myself that it meant nothing. It was just a bag. It was just a bad joke. But why did I still feel that shiver on the back of the neck? I went to the room without looking at the bag. She stayed there, still where I played her, but I felt her presence. As if there was something in her I expected. I couldn't sleep. Each small sound of the house seemed amplified. The snap of the furniture against the floor, a car passing the street, the wind touching the window. But the worst was when the silence came. The true silence, which seemed to fill the space like a thick liquid, where even the breath seemed too much noise. I closed my eyes. I forced myself to ignore the uncomfortable sensation, the shoulder tension, the stomach tight. Tomorrow I would solve that. But the next morning the bag was no longer there. My whole body froze to see the empty corner of the room. I looked around, feeling the cold sweat drip by the back of the neck. The door was still locked. The closed windows. Nothing was out of place, except for the absence. A absence as strong as a presence. I was stopped for long minutes, waiting for reality to make sense. Maybe I had moved it without realizing it. Maybe my tired mind was playing with me. But deep down I knew she had disappeared. And I live alone. I tried to convince myself that I had left her in the park, that the exhaustion of the previous night had created false memories, the details blurred. But then, why did I remember her weight in my hand? Why did I remember to have thrown her into that specific corner of the room? To this day, I don't know what happened that night. But sometimes when I walk the streets, I feel that someone is watching me. It is not always, only at specific times. When I go through a dark alley, when I'm alone waiting for the subway, when the silence around me seems deeper than it should, and I swear that, from time to time, I still hear that whisper, low, almost imperceptible, enough to remember that that night I made the right choice. Because maybe the mistake were to have looked, and this was one of our followers' stories. If you want your story to be told by us as well, leave it in the comments below this video. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more content like this, we prepared the next video especially for you. Click here to watch it,